The contractor didn't say hello when I picked up the phone. He just said, "Mrs. Parker, you need to come home right now, and come alone." There are moments in life when your body knows something your mind isn't ready to accept yet. Sitting there in the 10th pew at Willow Creek Church, listening to a sermon about grief and healing, I felt my chest tighten like someone had quietly locked a door from the inside. 9 months. That's how long it had been since Daniel died. 9 months of waking up to silence. 9 months of telling everyone I was doing okay because it was easier than explaining the kind of loneliness that doesn't make noise. I almost ignored the call. I almost told myself it could wait. But then Carlos said something else. His voice low, careful, like he was choosing each word so it wouldn't break something fragile. "I found something behind your garage wall. I think your husband left it for you." And just like that, nothing about my life felt stable anymore. I stood up before I even realized I was moving. The woman next to me glanced over, startled, as I slipped past her knees and out into the aisle. My heels echoed softly against the polished floor, louder than they should have been. The choir was still singing, the pastor still speaking, but it all sounded far away, like I was already stepping into a different world. Outside, the December air hit my face sharp and cold. I stood in the parking lot for a second, staring at my phone, replaying his words over and over. Something behind the wall. "Your husband left it for you." Daniel didn't leave things unfinished. That was the first thought that settled in my mind, steady and certain. He labeled everything, organized everything, planned everything. If he had hidden something, it wasn't random, it wasn't careless. It meant something. The drive home should have taken 9 minutes. I remember that because I watched the clock. I watched every second like it mattered, but it felt longer. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, my knuckles pale, my thoughts circling the same question again and again. Why didn't I know? Daniel and I ran our property management company together. I handled the daily operations, the tenants, the schedules. He handled the numbers, the contracts, the things that required patience and precision. We worked side by side for years. We shared everything, or at least I thought we did. When I turned onto Hawthorne Ridge, the house looked exactly the same. Quiet, ordinary, the kind of ordinary that feels safe until it doesn't. Carlos was waiting in the driveway, standing beside his truck with his tool belt still on, his shoulders tense in a way I hadn't seen before. He's not a man who scares easily. I trusted that about him. "Mrs. Parker," he said as I stepped out of the car. His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. I fixed the gas line. "You're safe." "But that's not why I called you." The way he said safe made my stomach drop. He led me into the garage without another word. The smell hit me first, faint but unmistakable, like something that had been leaking quietly for a long time. Then I saw it. The metal tool cabinet Daniel always kept against the back wall had been moved, not slightly, not accidentally. It had been dragged. The concrete floor showed fresh scrape marks cutting through years of dust. Carlos crouched down and ran his hand along the line. This wasn't moved months ago. This was recent. 2, maybe 3 weeks. My heart started beating harder, louder, like it was trying to get my attention. "Behind it," he said, standing again, stepping aside. The drywall had been cut open, clean lines, deliberate. And inside, recessed into the studs, was something I had never seen in 6 years of living in that house. A hidden compartment. For a moment, I just stood there. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared at it, trying to understand how something like that could exist in my home without me ever knowing. "Someone tried to get in," Carlos said quietly, pointing to faint scratches around the latch. "They didn't know how it worked, so they forced the cabinet and that loosened the gas fitting. That's what caused the leak. Someone had been in my garage. Someone had been looking for whatever was inside that wall, and they had been close." "Do you want me to stay?" he asked. I nodded, even though my throat felt too tight to speak. My hand was shaking when I reached for the latch. It was simple. Too simple. The kind of mechanism Daniel would design on purpose. Easy if you knew. Impossible if you didn't. I flipped it open. Inside sat a fireproof lockbox about the size of a small microwave. On top of it was a white label, printed in Daniel's neat, precise style. I recognized the font instantly. He used that label maker for everything. The words were centered, clean, intentional, emergency, for Emily only. That was the moment I realized something I wasn't ready to admit out loud yet. My husband hadn't just left something behind. He'd been preparing for someone to come looking for it. I didn't remember deciding to open the lockbox. One second I was staring at Daniel's label, and the next my fingers were already lifting the lid like they belonged to someone else. There are moments when the world narrows down to one small space, one single action, and everything else fades into the background. That was one of them. The garage felt too quiet, too still, like even the air was waiting. Inside the box, the first thing I saw was cash. Thick bundles of bills wrapped in rubber bands, stacked with the kind of neatness that only Daniel could manage. My brain registered the number before my heart could catch up. $38,750. Not loose money, not accidental savings, deliberate, collected over time, hidden. Under the cash was a large manila envelope stuffed so full it bent at the edges. A small black USB drive rested beside it, labeled in Daniel's handwriting, evidence, password protected, and beneath all of that, folded carefully, was a letter. My name was written on the front, Emily. For a second, I couldn't move. My hands hovered over it, trembling just enough that I had to press my fingers together to steady them. I had spent 9 months missing him, replaying the last conversation we had, wishing I could hear his voice one more time. And now suddenly he was here. Not alive, not really, but close enough to feel. "Take your time," Carlos said softly from behind me. "I'll be outside." I didn't even realize he had stepped closer. I just nodded, my eyes fixed on the letter as he quietly left, pulling the garage door down halfway, so I was alone. Alone with whatever Daniel had been trying to tell me. I unfolded the pages slowly, careful not to tear the creases. His handwriting was exactly the way I remembered it. Clean, controlled, every letter shaped with intention. The first line knocked the breath out of me. "Emily, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I didn't get to finish what I started." I stopped. I had to. My chest tightened so sharply it felt like something inside me had snapped. Gone. The words sat there, heavy and final, even though I already knew it was true. I forced myself to keep reading. "Your sister, Rachel, has been stealing from our company for the past 4 years. The words didn't make sense at first, not in any real way. They were just shapes on paper, something my eyes could see, but my mind refused to understand. Rachel, my little sister, the one I had helped through college, the one who used to call me crying over things as small as a bad day at work. I read the sentence again and again, waiting for it to change. It didn't. "She's been stealing," I whispered out loud, like saying it might make it more real. Or less. I wasn't sure which I wanted. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket, sharp and sudden, making me flinch so hard I nearly dropped the letter. I ignored it. Whoever it was could wait. This couldn't. I sat down on the cold concrete floor without thinking about it, the letter shaking slightly in my hands as I continued. Over $400,000, fake invoices, a shell company. She billed us monthly for services she never performed. The details were precise. Dates, amounts, patterns. Daniel had tracked everything. Of course he had. That was who he was. He didn't accuse without proof. He didn't guess. He knew. And then it got worse. She tried to frame you. I felt something drop inside me, like the ground had shifted and I hadn't noticed until it was too late. She forged your signature, created emails from your account. If I hadn't caught it, you would have taken the fall. My hand flew to my mouth before I could stop it. A small, broken sound escaped my throat, the kind you don't mean to make. I thought about every contract I had signed, every email I had sent, every time I trusted that the system we built together was solid, safe. Rachel had been standing inside that system the entire time. Daniel's words blurred for a moment as my eyes filled with tears, but I blinked them back, forcing myself to focus. I needed to know everything, not just the parts that hurt the least. I confronted her in September. I gave her 6 months to repay the money. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to break your heart. A bitter laugh slipped out before I could stop it. It sounded wrong in the empty garage. Too sharp. Too hollow. He had been protecting me, even from the truth, especially from the truth. But she didn't stop, he wrote. She escalated. More forgeries. More lies. By the end, I realized she wasn't just desperate. She was dangerous. Dangerous. The word echoed in my head louder than anything else. Not careless. Not struggling. Dangerous. I lowered the letter slowly, staring at the lockbox, the cash, the USB drive. All of it arranged so carefully, like a final message he had never gotten the chance to deliver in person. Someone had tried to break into that cabinet. Carlos had said it himself. Someone had been in my garage searching for this exact box. My sister had known, or at least she had suspected enough to come looking. And now, I was sitting here with everything she had tried to hide. The phone buzzed again in my pocket, longer this time, more insistent. I reached for it without taking my eyes off the box. It was my mother. Thinking about you today. Call me when you can. The message was simple. Too simple. The timing pressed against my thoughts in a way I couldn't ignore. 9 months of distance. Silence. And now, suddenly, she was reaching out. I looked back down at the letter in my hands, at Daniel's final words written in ink that hadn't faded at all. Everything you need is here. Finish this for us. I folded the pages carefully, placed them back into the box, and closed the lid with a soft click. For the first time since he died, I didn't feel lost. I felt something else instead. Focused. I carried the lockbox into the kitchen like it weighed far more than it should have. Not because of the cash or the documents, but because of what it meant. Every step felt deliberate, careful, like I was crossing into something I couldn't undo. The house was silent when I set it down on the table. Noonlight filtered through the windows, pale and cold, stretching across the hardwood floor in long, quiet lines. It was the same house Daniel and I had lived in for 6 years. The same kitchen where we had coffee every morning, where we argued about small things, where we planned a future that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. I opened my laptop with steady hands that didn't match the storm building inside me. The USB drive sat beside the keyboard, small and unremarkable. If I didn't know what was on it, I might have thought it was nothing, just another forgotten piece of tech. I plugged it in. The screen blinked once, then a window appeared. Enter password. I stared at it longer than I should have. Daniel had written it clearly. Something only we know. Our most private pain. Pain, not joy, not a happy memory. I typed in our wedding date first. June 14th, 2017. Denied. Of course it was. That would have been too obvious. I tried my birthday. March 3rd, 1982. Denied. Daniel's birthday. March 15th, 1978. Denied. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. Think like him, not like me. Daniel didn't choose things randomly. He chose things that meant something. Our address. Denied. The company name. Denied. I leaned back in the chair, pressing my fingers against my temples. The cursor blinked at me, patient and unforgiving. Our most private pain. What did that even mean? I stood up and paced the kitchen, the sound of my bare feet against the floor grounding me just enough to keep from spiraling. The refrigerator hummed softly. The clock on the wall ticked, each second stretching longer than it should have. My phone buzzed again on the counter. I ignored it. This mattered more. I sat back down and tried again. Different combinations, names, dates, places. Every memory I could think of that felt significant, each one denied. By the time the light outside faded into evening, I had tried more than a dozen passwords, maybe more. I lost count somewhere between frustration and exhaustion. Denied, denied, denied. The words started to feel personal. I pushed the laptop away slightly, staring at the lockbox again. The cash was still there, untouched. The manila envelope sat heavy with answers I hadn't fully opened yet. And the letter, I didn't need to read it again. I had already memorized the parts that mattered. I picked up the envelope next. If I couldn't get into the USB yet, then I would start here. Daniel wouldn't have left gaps. He would have built this step by step. The envelope was thick with bank statements. I slid them out carefully, stacking them in front of me. Month after month, page after page, each one marked with yellow highlighter wherever a payment had been made to Turner Consulting. I flipped through the first few, my eyes scanning the numbers. 7,900, 8,200, 11,400. Different amounts, same pattern, every single month. I pulled out a pen and started adding them up on a notepad, my handwriting tight and controlled. It felt mechanical, almost detached, like I was doing someone else's work. 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. The number kept climbing. By the time I reached the final page, my hand had gone still. $412,890. I stared at the number for a long time, letting it settle in a way the letter hadn't fully allowed. This wasn't just words anymore. This was proof. Rachel hadn't made a mistake. She had built something, a system, a routine, every month, like clockwork. I flipped back through the statements slower this time, reading the details Daniel had written in the margins, small notes, question marks, dates circled in red. He had been tracking her for years. The realization hit me harder than I expected. Not just what Rachel had done, but what Daniel had carried alone. Sitting across from her at family dinners, smiling, listening, knowing, and saying nothing to me. A tight, bitter feeling crept into my chest. Not anger, not exactly. Something more complicated than that. He had been trying to protect me. But from what? The truth? Or the version of my family I thought I had? My phone buzzed again. This time, I picked it up. It was Rachel. "Hey, Em, been thinking about you. We should get coffee this week." I read the message twice, my thumb hovering over the screen. The timing was too clean, too convenient. 9 months of silence, and now this. I set the phone down slowly, my mind already moving ahead of me. She didn't know what I had found. Not yet, but she knew something. Enough to reach out. Enough to try and get ahead of whatever I might discover. I looked back at the statements spread across the table, at the highlighted lines marking every dollar she had taken. Coffee. The word felt almost absurd in comparison to what I was holding in my hands. But maybe that was exactly what I needed. Not answers. Not yet. A performance. I picked up my phone again and typed carefully, keeping my tone light, casual, like nothing had changed. Sure. Thursday afternoon work for you? The reply came almost instantly. Perfect. I miss you. I stared at those last 3 words longer than I should have. Miss you. I set the phone down and leaned back in the chair, my eyes drifting to the USB drive still plugged into the laptop. I didn't know the password yet, but I didn't need it to see the truth anymore. I just needed to watch her try to hide it. I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early and chose a table where I could see the entrance without being obvious about it. It was the kind of place Rachel loved. Warm lighting, polished wood tables, the soft hum of conversation layered over the hiss of an espresso machine. Safe, familiar, ordinary. I wrapped my hands around a cup of black coffee I hadn't touched yet and kept my eyes on the door. My reflection stared back at me in the window beside my table. I looked composed, calm, like a woman who hadn't just uncovered 4 years of betrayal buried in bank statements and hidden behind a wall in her own garage. At exactly 2 o'clock, Rachel walked in. She didn't hesitate, didn't scan the room like someone unsure. She moved with the easy confidence of someone who believed she still belonged exactly where she was. Her hair was perfectly styled, soft waves falling over her shoulders. She wore a tailored coat that probably cost more than most people's rent, and when she smiled at the barista, it was effortless, natural, practiced. Nothing about her looked like a woman carrying secrets. Her eyes found me, and her face lit up like it always used to. Emily. She crossed the room quickly and pulled me into a hug before I could stand. Her perfume was the same as always, something floral and expensive that lingered just a little too long. "You look good," she said, stepping back to study my face. "Really good." I forced a small smile. "I've been managing." We sat. A server came by and Rachel ordered a vanilla latte with oat milk, extra foam. Of course she did. I almost smiled at how predictable it was. For a few minutes, we talked about nothing. The weather, the holidays coming up, work, the safe things people say when they're avoiding everything that matters. But I watched her, every movement, every shift in her expression. I waited. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "Mom says you've been quiet lately. She's worried about you." I stirred my coffee, though I hadn't added anything to it. Grief doesn't exactly make people social. Of course not. Her tone softened, sympathetic. I hate thinking about you alone in that house. It's a lot, you know? All those memories. There it was, a small push. I met her eyes. I'm managing. She nodded, but I caught the flicker of something behind it. Not concern, something sharper, calculating. "You know," she continued, "if you ever wanted to sell, Trevor and I could help. The market's really strong right now. You could start fresh somewhere smaller, start fresh, away from the garage, away from the hidden cabinet, away from everything Daniel had left behind." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "I'm not ready for that." "Of course," she said quickly, recovering. "I just thought I'd offer." I let the silence stretch for a beat longer than was comfortable. Then I tilted my head slightly like I was remembering something. "Actually, I've been going through some of Daniel's files lately, trying to get everything organized." Her fingers tightened around her cup, just slightly. "Oh? Yeah, there's a lot of paperwork, contracts, invoices, all that. Some of it's confusing." She forced a small laugh. "Daniel always kept things complicated." I shrugged. "I guess. I came across some consulting invoices." "Turner Consulting? That was you, right?" Her smile didn't disappear, but it changed, tightened at the edges. "Yeah," she said carefully. "I did some consulting for the company." "What kind of consulting?" She didn't hesitate. "Vendor coordination. Helping connect contractors with properties, negotiating rates, that kind of thing. Rehearsed, clean, too clean." I nodded slowly. "Did you ever actually go out to the properties?" "Sometimes. Not often." "Why?" I held her gaze, just trying to understand how everything worked. For a split second, something passed through her eyes. Not fear, not yet, but awareness. She leaned forward, lowering her voice again. "If you want, I can come by and walk you through everything. It's easy to misunderstand those records if you don't know what you're looking at." There it was again. Control the narrative before I understood the truth? I smiled faintly. I'll keep that in mind. She relaxed a fraction. Not much, just enough to think she was still ahead of me. I let the conversation drift again for a minute before I spoke. I had someone come look at the garage last week. There was a gas smell. Her reaction was immediate, even if she tried to hide it, a flicker in her eyes. A pause before she spoke. A gas leak? That's dangerous. It wasn't serious. Just a loose fitting. She nodded, picking up her cup, taking a sip that felt more like something to do with her hands than anything else. The contractor said something had been moved recently, I added casually, like someone had shifted the tool chest against the back wall. Her hand froze for just a second. Did you move it? No, I haven't touched the garage in months. She set the cup down carefully. Maybe Daniel moved it before. The contractor said the marks were recent, within a few weeks. Silence. Then she smiled again, too quickly. That's strange. I watched her. Really watched her this time. The way her shoulders held tension she wasn't aware of. The way her fingers tapped once against the table before going still. She knew. She knew exactly what was behind that wall, and she knew she hadn't been able to get into it. The rest of the conversation barely mattered. She tried to steer it back to safe ground, asking about my plans, offering help again, suggesting we shouldn't let so much time pass between us, but I had already seen everything I needed to see. When we finally stood to leave, she hugged me again, tighter this time. "Don't shut me out, okay?" she whispered. "We're family. Family." I pulled back just enough to look at her. "I miss you too," I said. The lie came easier than I expected. We walked in opposite directions toward our cars. I didn't look back, but I could feel it. The shift. Rachel knew I was getting close, and for the first time since I found the lockbox, I realized something else. She wasn't just worried about what I might find, she was scared of what I might already know. The message came through before I even started the engine. Stop digging. You won't like what you find. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering just above it, like touching it might make the words disappear. Unknown number, no name, no signature, just a threat, clean and simple. My heart didn't race the way I expected. It slowed, became deliberate. Focused. I took a screenshot, then another, forwarded both to Fiona with one short line, anonymous, just left Rachel. Her reply came almost instantly, save everything. Do not respond. I locked my phone and leaned back in the driver's seat, staring through the windshield at the gray sky hanging low over the parking lot. People moved around me, ordinary, unaware. Someone laughed near the cafe door. A car pulled out beside me. Life continuing, untouched. But something had shifted. Rachel wasn't just nervous anymore. She was reacting. And people don't react unless they feel threatened. I started the car and drove home, my hand steady on the wheel even as my mind moved faster than the road in front of me. The pieces were lining up now. The timing of her message, the way she had watched me during coffee, the way her voice had tightened when I mentioned the garage. She knew I was getting close. What she didn't know was how close. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as always, quiet, still, almost too still. I sat there for a moment before getting out, scanning the windows without meaning to. Habit, maybe, or instinct. Nothing moved. Inside, everything was exactly where I had left it. The kitchen table still covered in bank statements, the laptop still open, the USB drive still waiting. I locked the door behind me, then checked it again. The silence felt heavier now, not peaceful, watchful. I walked to the drawer where we kept the spare key. It was still there, but not where it should have been, not hanging on the small hook Daniel had installed years ago, labeled in his neat handwriting, spare house key. Instead, it lay loose at the bottom of the drawer, half buried under takeout menus and rubber bands. A cold feeling slid through my chest. I didn't remember taking it off that hook, and I didn't remember putting it back like that. I closed the drawer slowly and turned toward the door leading into the garage. The lock looked untouched. No scratches, no damage. But if someone knew where the spare key was, they wouldn't need to break in. Family would know. Rachel had been in this house more times than I could count. She knew exactly where everything was. Diego had said the marks were recent, 2, maybe 3 weeks, late November. I thought about my schedule. The evenings I was out, checking properties, the hours the house sat empty, plenty of time. I stepped into the garage, the air faintly carrying that same lingering scent of motor oil and wood dust. The cabinet was closed now, the drywall panel leaning back in place, hiding what had already been exposed. But I could still see it. The marks on the floor, the slight misalignment of the tool chest, the evidence of someone who had tried and failed. Rachel had been here. She had stood in this exact spot trying to get into something she didn't understand. And when she couldn't, she had left, not knowing she had triggered the one thing Daniel designed to bring me back. I let out a slow breath and stepped back inside, closing the garage door behind me. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Rachel. "Hey, I had a really nice time today. We should do it again soon. Maybe I can come by and help you sort through Daniel's files. Would hate for you to get overwhelmed." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so transparent now. She wanted back inside, back into this house, back into that garage, back into whatever she thought she could still control. I typed my response carefully, each word chosen, each pause intentional. "I'll let you know. Things are a bit hectic right now." Her reply came seconds later. "Of course. Anytime. I'm here for you." I set the phone down and looked at the USB drive again. Everything came back to that. The one thing she hadn't been able to destroy. The one thing I still couldn't access. Not yet. I sat down at the table and pulled the laptop closer. The password box was still open, the cursor blinking patiently, waiting. Our most private pain. I closed my eyes, letting the words settle in a way they hadn't before. Not as a puzzle, not as something to solve, as a memory. What had we shared that no one else knew? Not the happy moments. Those were too easy, too visible. Pain. Something we never talked about. Something we buried. I thought about the years with Daniel. The early days, the middle, the quiet changes that come with time. And then it hit me. Not like a lightning strike. Not sudden. Slow. Heavy. Inevitable. The hospital room. The silence that followed. The name we never said out loud to anyone else. I opened my eyes, my breath catching just slightly. If I was right, everything was about to change. I didn't type it right away. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, suspended between knowing and proving. The kitchen felt too quiet again, the kind of quiet that presses in on your ears until your own breathing sounds too loud. I whispered it first. Her name. The one we never said out loud anymore. The one we had buried so deeply it felt almost unreal to bring it back into the room. My throat tightened, but I forced my hands to move. Slowly. Carefully. Rowan, 2011. I pressed enter. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the screen shifted. A folder appeared. I stopped breathing. It worked. The rush that hit me wasn't relief. It was something heavier, final, like a door closing behind me the second it opened in front of me. I clicked into the folder. Dozens of files, organized, labeled, structured with the same meticulous precision Daniel used for everything in his life. Invoices, emails, accounting exports, forensics, video. He hadn't just suspected Rachel. He had built a case. I opened the first folder. Invoices. 52 files. each one dated, numbered, formatted like legitimate business documents. I clicked one at random and stared at it. The layout clean and professional, the wording vague enough to sound real but empty enough to mean nothing. Property coordination, vendor management, consulting services, all signed by Rachel Turner. I right-clicked, opened the file properties, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Author, Rachel Turner. Computer name, Rachel HP Laptop. She hadn't even hidden it properly, or maybe she never thought anyone would look. I opened another. Same pattern, same metadata, same carelessness hidden behind a surface of control. Every invoice created on her personal computer on the same day it was issued. I leaned back slightly, my eyes burning from the screen but unable to look away. This wasn't just theft. This was arrogance. I moved to the next folder. Emails, dozens of message threads, neatly organized by month. Conversations between Rachel and supposed vendors. Names I didn't recognize. Companies that sounded real enough to pass a quick glance. I opened one. A contractor confirming completed work. An attached invoice. A polite closing signature. It looked perfect. Until I opened the forensics report Daniel had included. Every single email traced back to the same IP address, Rachel's home network. She had been emailing herself, creating both sides of the conversation, building an illusion so complete it could have fooled anyone who didn't know where to look. I felt a strange kind of detachment settle over me as I clicked through file after file, like I was watching something unfold that had already happened. Something I couldn't change, only understand. Accounting records. The money flow was clean. Too clean. Company account to Turner Consulting. Turner Consulting to Rachel's personal account. Withdrawals within 48 hours. Every time. No hesitation, no deviation. A system. I swallowed hard and opened the next folder. Forgeries. My name stared back at me from the screen. My signature. Or something that looked enough like it to pass. 14 documents. 14 approvals I had never given. I leaned closer, comparing the real version beside the fake. The differences were small, subtle, the kind you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for them. But they were there. The angle of a letter, the spacing between strokes, the way the line trailed at the end. She had studied it, practiced it, used it. I sat back slowly, a tight pressure building behind my ribs. She hadn't just taken money. She had tried to become me, to erase me. I closed that folder and moved to the next. Casino records. Page after page of statements. Losses stacking on top of losses. Slot machines, table games, poker. Hundreds of thousands gone. It wasn't just greed. It was desperation feeding something she couldn't control. But desperation didn't explain everything. Not the planning. Not the lies. Not the way she had looked at me across that cafe table and smiled like none of this existed. I clicked into the final folder. Video testimony. One file, Daniel's name. I hesitated this time. Not because I didn't want to know. Because I knew this would be the last piece. The one that turned everything from evidence into something personal. I pressed play. He appeared on the screen sitting in the garage, exactly where I had stood just hours before. The same workbench, the same shelf with his label maker. He looked tired, more than I remembered, but his eyes were steady, clear. My name is Daniel Hayes. Today is February 20th, 2021. His voice filled the kitchen, and something inside me cracked in a way I hadn't allowed since the day he died. He laid it out calmly, methodically, every detail I had just read, now spoken in his own words. Rachel's theft, the amount, the fake company, the forged documents, and then the part that hit hardest. She tried to frame my wife. I closed my eyes for a second, gripping the edge of the table as his voice continued. He explained how he had confronted her, how she had admitted it, The gambling, the lies, how he had given her time, 6 months, for me, because he didn't want to break me. When I opened my eyes again, he was looking directly at the camera. If anything happens to me, Emily, use this. Don't let her destroy you. The video ended. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had come before. I stared at the screen, at the frozen image of him mid-breath, and felt something settle inside me. Not grief, not anymore. Clarity. My phone buzzed on the table, pulling me back into the room. Another message, unknown number. I know you found something. We need to talk. Don't make this worse. I didn't hesitate this time. I took the screenshot, forwarded it to Fiona. Then I reached for my phone again and scrolled to another contact. Warren Gresham, the lawyer Daniel had never made it to. I pressed call. When he answered, I didn't waste time. I found everything, I said. Every file, every record, the video, all of it. There was a pause on the line, then his voice calm and sharp. Then we moved fast. I looked at the screen one last time before closing the laptop. Rachel thought she was ahead of me. She thought she still had time. She was wrong. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, but because everything had shifted into motion, and I could feel it in my bones. The waiting was over. The doubt was gone. All that was left was execution. At 8:45 in the morning, I stood outside a brick building on Liberty Street, staring at the polished brass sign that read, Gresham and Associates, Estate and Fraud Litigation. The words felt heavier now that I understood exactly what they meant. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The receptionist greeted me with a soft, professional smile, but her eyes lingered just a moment longer when I gave my name. She knew who I was, or at least, she knew why I was here. Mr. Gresham is expecting you. Of course he was. The hallway was quiet, lined with framed degrees and certificates that told a story of years spent fighting battles like the one I was about to walk into. When I entered the conference room, he was already there, mid-50s, sharp eyes, posture straight but relaxed. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to control a room. Mrs. Hayes, he said, standing to shake my hand. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. So am I. I didn't sit right away. Instead, I placed everything on the table one piece at a time. The USB drive, the bank statements, the printed screenshots of the messages, Daniel's letter. He watched quietly, saying nothing until I finished. Then he sat. Show me. I plugged in the USB and opened the folders, walking him through it the same way I had discovered it. Invoices, emails, accounting trails, forgeries, the casino records. He didn't interrupt, but I could see it in his face. The small tightening around his eyes, the shift in his posture, the moment he understood exactly how serious this was. When I played the video, he leaned forward slightly, his attention sharpening in a way that felt almost surgical. When it ended, the room stayed silent for a long moment. Your husband was very thorough, he said finally. That was Daniel. He nodded once. This is more than thorough. This is prosecutable. The word landed between us like something solid, prosecutable. I sat down slowly. So what happens now? He folded his hands on the table. Right now, you have strong evidence. Very strong. But without context, she can still argue legitimacy, consulting fees, business discretion, poor documentation. I leaned forward. Even with all of that? He met my eyes. The USB changes everything. The forensics, the metadata, the video testimony. That's your leverage. That's your case. I exhaled slowly, feeling something inside me settle into place. So we take it to the police. Not yet. The answer caught me off guard. He continued before I could respond. We move strategically. If we go straight to criminal charges, we lose control of the timeline. The district attorney takes over. We become part of a process, and if we don't, then we give her a choice. I frowned slightly. A choice. He nodded. We present the evidence. We offer a settlement, full restitution, immediate resignation, asset transfer, and in exchange, we hold off on filing criminal charges. My chest tightened. You want me to give her a way out. I want you to control the outcome. The distinction sat between us, uncomfortable and necessary. He leaned back slightly. If she refuses, we file everything. Embezzlement, fraud, identity theft, wire fraud. She's looking at years in prison. Years. The word echoed in my head longer than it should have. And if she accepts, then she pays. She walks away with nothing. And you move on with your life. Move on. I almost smiled at how simple he made it sound. My phone buzzed in my bag. I ignored it. Focus, Emily. Mr. Gresham slid a legal pad toward himself and began writing, his pen moving quickly. There's one more thing you need to understand. She knows you're looking. The messages you received, those are pressure tactics. She's trying to scare you into backing off. She came by my house yesterday. His pen stopped, unannounced, coffee in hand, trying to feel out what I knew. He looked up slowly. Did you tell her anything? No. Good. His voice sharpened slightly. From this point forward, you don't speak to her unless I'm present. You don't respond to messages. You don't give her anything she can use. I nodded. He tapped the USB drive lightly. This is your advantage. She doesn't know how much you have. Yet. Exactly. Silence stretched for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind since I opened that first file. How long would she go to prison? He didn't hesitate. If this goes to trial and she's convicted on everything, 8 to 12 years, possibly more depending on how the charges stack. I swallowed. 8 to 12 years. A lifetime in a way. He watched me carefully. You need to decide what you want, Emily. Justice or closure. Sometimes they're the same thing. Sometimes they're not. I looked down at my hands, at the faint tremor I hadn't noticed until now. She tried to destroy me. Yes, she did. I lifted my head and met his gaze. Then we do it your way. A slow, measured nod. Good. He stood, gathering the documents into neat stacks. I'll draft the demand letter today. We'll present it to her within 48 hours. And if she panics? He gave a small, almost humorless smile. She already is. As I stood to leave, my phone buzzed again. This time I checked it. Rachel, we need to talk. Please. I stared at the message for a moment, then locked the screen without replying. She wanted to talk now that the walls were closing in. I stepped out into the cold air, the city moving around me like nothing had changed. But everything had. For the first time since Daniel died, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was in control. The doorbell rang on Sunday afternoon, and I already knew it was her before I even checked. Still, I pulled up the camera feed on my phone. Rachel stood on my porch, holding 2 coffee cups like a peace offering, her smile perfectly in place, her posture relaxed, as if this were just another casual visit between sisters. I saved the footage before I opened the door. Emily, she said brightly, lifting one of the cups slightly, I brought your favorite. I stepped aside and let her in, closing the door behind her with a quiet click that sounded louder than it should have. You didn't have to do that. I know, she said, walking past me into the living room like she still belonged there. I was nearby and I've been thinking about you. Of course she had. She set the cups down on the table and turned to me, her expression softening in that familiar way that used to mean something. You've seemed distant since Thursday. I just wanted to check on you. I picked up the coffee she handed me but didn't drink it. I'm fine, just busy. She studied my face for a moment, searching, measuring. Then she sat down, crossing her legs neatly, settling into the space like she had done 1,000 times before. "Can I be honest with you?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. "I don't think Daniel was as happy as you thought he was." The words landed carefully, deliberately. I kept my expression neutral. "What do you mean?" She hesitated just long enough to make it feel real. "He talked to me sometimes. About work, about the pressure, about feeling trapped. Trapped." I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I tilted my head slightly. "That doesn't sound like him." "I know," she said quickly. "That's what I thought too." But toward the end, things changed. He was working late all the time, stressed, distant. He told me he was putting something together, some kind of plan. A plan. My grip tightened slightly around the cup. What kind of plan? She looked down for a second, then back at me, her eyes filled with something that almost looked like concern. He said he needed to protect the business, that there were things he couldn't explain yet. I watched her carefully, every word, every pause. She was building something, not the truth, a version of it. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I don't want you to be blindsided," she said softly. "If you find something, files, documents, anything Daniel left behind, I want you to come to me first." There it was, the reason she was here. I shook my head slightly. "I haven't found anything." Her eyes flickered, just for a second. "Nothing? Just old paperwork, tax stuff, insurance. Nothing unusual." She leaned back, exhaling slowly, her shoulders relaxing in a way she probably didn't even notice. "Good," she said. "That's good." I took a slow sip of the coffee, finally, letting the silence stretch. Then I set the cup down and spoke casually. Although I did come across something interesting. Her body stilled. Some old invoices. Consulting fees. A few $100,000 over a couple of years. Daniel had flagged them. Her face went pale. I held her gaze. He thought they didn't add up. She blinked, her composure cracking just slightly before she pulled it back together. "I don't remember anything like that," she said quickly. "Really?" Her voice sharpened just a fraction. "Daniel overanalyzed everything. You know that. He probably just misunderstood." I nodded slowly. "Maybe." She stood abruptly, smoothing her coat like she needed something to do with her hands. "I should go. I have. Something later." Of course she did. I walked her to the door, every step measured, controlled. She turned to me before stepping out, her expression softer now, almost pleading. "Emily, if you find anything at all, please come to me first. There are things you don't understand, things that could hurt you." I met her eyes. "From what?" She hesitated. Then she smiled again, that same practiced, careful smile. "From the truth." She walked down the steps, her heels clicking softly against the pavement, and got into her car without looking back. I stood in the doorway until she drove away. Then I closed the door and locked it. The house felt different now. Not quiet, not still, clear. I pulled out my phone and dialed Warren before I could second guess it. "She came by," I said as soon as he answered. "Tried to get ahead of it." Of course she did. His voice was calm. "What did she say?" I told him everything, every word, every reaction, every moment her composure slipped. When I finished, there was a brief pause. Then he spoke. "She's scared." "Good. That's exactly where we want her." I leaned against the kitchen counter, closing my eyes for just a second. She tried to rewrite the story. Make it look like Daniel was the one hiding something. He exhaled softly. Standard defense strategy. Undermine the source before the evidence surfaces. I opened my eyes. She knows I'm close. Yes. And now she's trying to control the damage. My phone buzzed in my hand. Another message. This time, not from Rachel. An unknown number. I opened it slowly. "We need to resolve this before it gets out of control. No signature, no name. But I didn't need one. I looked back toward the door, the echo of her footsteps still lingering in my mind. She wasn't just scared anymore. She was desperate. The envelope arrived Monday morning, thick, cream-colored, and sent by certified mail. I knew what it was before I even signed for it. The return address confirmed it. Kent Ashford, attorney at law. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I set it on the kitchen counter and took 2 photos, front and back, capturing the postmark, the name, the time. Then I sliced it open carefully with a butter knife and pulled the documents out. 3 pages, clean, formal, precise. Demand for return of property. I read it once, then again, slower. Every sentence was a threat wrapped in legal language. I was in possession of company documents. I was interfering with business operations. I was risking civil action, financial damages, and immediate legal consequences if I didn't return everything within 14 days. My name sat at the top of the page like a target. For a moment, I just stood there, the paper held loosely in my hand, letting the weight of it settle. She had moved fast. Thursday, we met for coffee. Sunday, she showed up at my house. And now this, already drafted, already mailed. She wasn't just reacting. She was building a narrative. I pulled out my phone and texted Warren. Received legal threat. Will bring to meeting. His reply came almost immediately. Do not respond. See you at 1. I exhaled slowly and set the letter down beside the rest of the evidence. The timing was almost impressive. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her version. The concerned sister, the cooperative business partner, the one trying to clean up confusion before it turned into something worse. Except now I knew exactly what she was trying to protect. At 1 o'clock, I sat across from Warren again, the same conference room, the same steady presence, but this time, the energy felt different, focused, sharper. I handed him the letter without a word. He read it carefully, his expression unreadable at first. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth lifted, not a smile, something closer to recognition. This is good. I frowned slightly. Good? He tapped the page lightly. This is panic. I leaned back in my chair. She's threatening me. She's trying to scare you. Big difference. He set the letter aside and pulled his laptop closer. Everything she's accusing you of is meaningless if we can prove criminal conduct. You can't steal evidence of a crime, and you certainly can't be sued for exposing it. I watched him for a moment, letting that settle. So this doesn't change anything. It changes everything, he said. It confirms she knows you have something. It means she's already talking to her lawyer, trying to get ahead of this. He looked up at me. That gives us leverage. I nodded slowly. He turned the laptop toward me and plugged in the USB. Let's make sure there's nothing we've missed. For the next 40 minutes, he moved through the files with a precision that made my earlier review feel almost surface level. He cross-referenced timestamps, compared metadata, pulled up financial trails, and traced them line by line. When he opened the video again, he didn't just watch it. He paused it, rewound it, noted exact phrases, exact times, exact statements Daniel had made. When it ended, he sat back and exhaled slowly. This is a prosecutor's dream. The words hung in the air. Multiple felony counts, embezzlement, fraud, identity theft, forgery, wire fraud. Each one carried weight, years, consequences that couldn't be undone. I felt it then, not as anger, but as something quieter, final. What happens now? He closed the laptop and folded his hands. We send the demand letter tomorrow morning, certified, to her and her attorney. And then she has 72 hours. 72 hours. To do what? To decide if she wants to spend the next decade in prison or walk away with nothing. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. He continued. Full restitution, partnership buyout, asset transfer, immediate resignation, and a clause. If she misses a single payment or violates any term, we file criminal charges immediately. My eyes dropped to the table, to the neat stack of evidence that had once been hidden behind a wall. She loses everything. Yes. Silence settled between us. He studied me carefully. You're hesitating. I shook my head slightly. No, just processing. He nodded. That's normal. She's your sister. The word felt distant now. Was. My phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number again. I opened it. We can fix this. Please don't do anything you'll regret. I showed it to Warren. He read it, then handed the phone back. She's trying to negotiate without terms. That means she knows she's losing. I locked the screen. Letter. He gave a small nod. Good. We sat in silence for a moment longer before he spoke again. There's one more thing. He reached into a folder and pulled out a document, sliding it across the table toward me. Property records. I frowned slightly and picked it up. An LLC. Registered under Rachel's name. 2 residential properties. Purchased within months of Daniel's death. Paid in cash. The numbers hit me harder than I expected. She bought houses. With stolen money, he said calmly. I stared at the page, my chest tightening. While I was grieving, while I was trying to hold everything together, she was building something else. A life funded by what she took. I looked up slowly. Can we take them back? His answer was immediate. Yes. The word landed like something solid, certain. Then we added to the demand. He nodded. Already done. I set the papers down carefully, my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. This wasn't just about what she took anymore. It was about everything she built on top of it. I stood gathering my things, the USB, the statements, the letter. 72 hours, I said quietly. 72 hours, he confirmed. As I walked out of the building, my phone buzzed again. Rachel, please just talk to me. I didn't stop walking. I didn't reply. She had 72 hours. And for the first time since this began, I knew exactly how it was going to end. Friday morning felt colder than it should have. The kind of cold that settles into your chest and stays there even when you're standing inside. I sat at the long conference table, hands folded in front of me, the evidence arranged in clean, deliberate stacks beside Warren. Across from us, 2 empty chairs waited. Fiona sat to my right, quiet but steady, her presence grounding in a way I didn't realize I needed. At exactly 10 o'clock, the door opened. Kent Ashford stepped in first, his expression already tight, already aware of how this was going to go. Rachel followed behind him, and for the first time since this began, she didn't look composed. Her makeup was perfect, her clothes expensive, her posture controlled, but her eyes gave her away, red-rimmed, tired, scared. Emily, she started, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. Warren didn't let her finish. No private conversations. Everything stays on record. Please sit. She hesitated, then lowered herself into the chair, her hands trembling slightly as she placed her purse on the table. Kent opened his folder, trying to regain control of a situation that was already slipping away. My client is willing to discuss a resolution. We'll get to that, Warren said calmly. First, we review the evidence. He didn't rush. He laid it out piece by piece, each document placed in front of them like a step they couldn't step back from. The invoices first, all 52, the totals, the pattern, the company that existed only on paper. Rachel tried to speak once, her voice rising slightly. Those services were legitimate. Warren slid the contractor statements across the table. None of these vendors know you. None of them worked with you. Silence. Then the emails. He projected them onto the screen, the threads that looked real until you saw the truth underneath. The IP address. The same one, over and over. Her home network. You emailed yourself. he said evenly. You created both sides of the conversation. Kent leaned toward her, whispering something I couldn't hear. Her face drained further, her composure cracking in small, visible fractures. Then the money trail. Every transfer, every withdrawal, every dollar traced from the company account to her personal one, and then the forgeries. My name appeared on the screen again, my signature split beside hers, real and fake, side by side. 14 documents, Warren said, 14 instances of identity theft. Rachel's hands shook now, no longer subtle. I was desperate, she said, her voice breaking. You were methodical, Warren replied. The room felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Then he played the video. Daniel's voice filled the space, steady and clear, cutting through everything she had tried to build. Every lie, every excuse, every attempt to twist the story. When it ended, no one spoke. Not for a long moment. Then Warren closed the laptop and folded his hands. You have two options. He slid the document across the table. Full restitution. Asset transfer. Immediate resignation. No contact. 75 days to complete payment. Or, he paused just long enough, we file criminal charges Monday morning. The words settled like gravity. Rachel stared at the paper, her breathing uneven now, her fingers gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing holding her up. Kent leaned in, speaking low and fast, but I could see it in his face. He knew. This was over. Rachel looked up at me then, really looked at me, and for a second, I saw something raw, not manipulation, not performance, just the realization of what she had done and what it had cost her. Emily, please, I didn't move. I didn't soften. You tried to make me the criminal, I said quietly. You tried to take everything from me. Her voice cracked. I didn't think. You thought enough to plan it for 4 years. Silence. Kent straightened, his voice controlled but defeated. My client accepts the terms. Warren nodded once. The paperwork came out. 8 pages. Rachel signed them slowly, her hand unsteady, her signature barely recognizable by the end. Kent signed. Warren signed. Then the pen was in my hand. I signed my name clearly, clean, certain. It was done. By 4:47 that afternoon, the first payment came through. Warren's message was simple. Payment received. $300,000. I stared at the screen for a long moment before setting the phone down. 9 months of grief, weeks of unraveling the truth, hours of confrontation, and now, silence again. But this time, it felt different. Not empty. Resolved. That night, I sat alone in the garage, in the space where Daniel had built the hidden cabinet, where all of this had started. His tools were still there. His label maker sat in the corner, the last strip still reading in his neat handwriting. Emergency for Emily only. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands, feeling the weight of everything he had carried alone. I finished it, I whispered into the quiet. And for the first time, I believed it. Not revenge, justice, something earned, something final. If you've stayed with me through this story, through every twist and every truth, take a moment to reflect on what you would have done in my place. Stories like this aren't just about what happened, but about what we choose when everything falls apart. If this resonated with you, go ahead and like the video, subscribe for more stories like this, and leave a comment with 3 simple words: justice over blood,